What event made you say, wow, people are really dumb? I worked at a bank. Mobile depositing had just became a thing. We received a picture of someone's cash for deposit. Story 2. A woman I used to work with who insisted that any animal could reproduce with any other animal. She believed that sperm from any animal was the same and that DNA was irrelevant. She believed this because she once saw some sickly, possibly deformed puppies and decided that they must have been half dog and half rat. Story 3. One of my nieces had a cold as a toddler and was breathing through her mouth. My ex flipped out because he didn't want her to get carbon monoxide poisoning from breathing through her mouth instead of her nose. Story 4. I teach 6th grade. One time a parent came to me after trying to help their child with math homework and asked, "What number is X worth? It feels like it changes with every problem." Story 5. On 9/11, my general manager called his daughter who was attending ASU to wake her up and make sure she saw what was going on. The customer service manager said, "It won't be on her TV yet. Arizona is 2 hours behind us." Story 6. I worked at Little Caesars and we were proofing the dough for pizza. My boss said at 7 p.m. that the dough needed to rise for 12 hours and took out her calculator to do the math. So I said, that's going to be 7 a.m. Then she said the dough will expire in 48 hours and started doing the math again. I told her it would expire 2 days from now, and she said, "That's kind of weird how that works out, huh?" I quit shortly after that. Story 7. I'm an insurance claims adjuster. If you truly knew how many stupid drivers you're sharing the road with, you'd never drive again. I avoid driving whenever possible. I have a car, but I take the bus to from work. I never drive at night. Story 8. At the start of working from home due to COVID, I had a few users submit tickets for connectivity issues. These tickets got through 2 lines of support before landing in my queue. Turns out that the corporate Wi-Fi doesn't follow you home, and you need home internet in order to connect to the VPN. Story 9. In grade 10, we had a science test, and the teacher gave 1 point for putting a date on the paper and 1 point for your name on the paper. And then there were 98 points for the rest of the test. A guy sitting in front of me got 0.5 out of 100. He didn't write the date and only wrote his first name. Story 10. A woman in my town called into a radio station to complain about the deer crossing signs on a highway, saying that the deer will see the sign and consider this place a safe place to cross the road. Story 11. Infantryman was told to trim the hedges. He lifted the lawnmower up with his hands right as his buddy started it up. As a brand new medic, I spent about 6 hours pulling finger meat from the hedges. Story 12. I was at a party and someone's shitty old truck got stuck in some mud, so instead of sobering up and coming back the next day, he makes a Molotov cocktail with gas and throws it at the truck. The truck caught fire and was completely destroyed. Story 13. Knew a kid who drank bleach to prove it wouldn't kill you. A week later, he showed up at school after taking a shot. He said he proved his point when the teacher asked why he was bragging about it. He said he proved his point when the teacher asked why he was bragging about it. Mr. Hawk just said, "But you cannot argue that without that medical treatment, you'd have died, though. You even said you have stomach damage and a burned esophagus yourself." This kid was bragging about that. He was not mentally disabled or otherwise. He was just that kind of idiot. Story 14. When I was in high school, we were reading a short story about what would have happened if the Japanese attacked us back with nuclear weapons after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A girl in my class raised her hand and said something along the lines of, "Why does this matter? None of it is real anyway." The teacher had to ask her to clarify, but this girl thought World War II and the bombing of Japan were just from a movie and didn't actually happen. The best part is, the girl was half Japanese. Story 15. I was looking for my phone when it was in my hand the whole entire time. I even answered a call, then continuing looking for it during the call. Story 16. You know the reason you bury a rattlesnake after you kill it is because bees will eat it. Then bees can sting people with rattlesnake venom. I overheard this from a guy who was constantly trying to pick up women on public transit. Story 16. A former coworker was talking about how she wanted to go back to school to get her master's degree because she only had a bachelorette degree and wanted more job opportunities. I said, "Do you mean a bachelor's degree?" She insisted it was pronounced bachelorette when it was given to a woman. Then she led me back to her office and pointed at her diploma to the word baccalaureate and said, "See? It says bachelorette." I work in highway safety. I can no longer count on two hands the number of people I've stopped with in the middle lane of traffic on a freeway, with no bigger problem than a flat tire. When I question them as to why they stopped in the middle of a freeway, the typical answer is either the vehicle wouldn't go any further, or they don't want to damage their rim. I swear, to whatever you want me to swear to, people will put the well-being of the rim on their car above their own safety, and even the safety of their children. Story 18. I once got into an argument with someone over my own name. There are two pronunciations, German and English, and they just couldn't accept the fact that I use the English pronunciation, despite the fact that we were speaking English, and it's what I've used my whole life. But nope, I was lying to mess with them. Story 19. I gave up on humanity when I overheard a customer arguing that their tattoo is backwards, while their artist tries to explain that no, your tattoo is fine, it just looks backwards because that's how mirrors work. Story 20. I've got two little girls who were born 15 months apart. They look pretty similar, and we get asked if they're twins pretty often. Even though one is quite a bit taller, you'd be forgiven for thinking they were fraternal twins. But yeah, I once got into an argument with somebody over whether my daughters are twins or not. It wasn't until I pointed out that I was literally there, watching them being birthed, that they finally conceded. Story 21. I worked with a lady who was remarking on how a friend of hers had lost a bunch of weight. She pondered, "I wonder how many Diet Cokes she had to drink to do that." That same lady was convinced beyond repair that when you sneeze, the air only comes out of your nose. There was no convincing her otherwise. Story 22. About half the calls I take on a daily basis. People call 911 to ask whether Walmart is open, to report that they didn't get enough mayo on their burger, to complain that cleanup at a fatality wreck is taking too long. All sorts of silly, out-of-touch shit. Granted, there is probably some level of mental illness and/or substance abuse present in those calls. But still. Story 23. I had a coworker, really sweet girl, but dumb as shit, tell me she smoked American Spirits because they were non-addictive, see? As she showed me the box. "Oh, honey, no, that says no additives." Such a sweet, stupid girl. She was a good server, at least. Story 24. I worked in retail for a few years, and it taught me that many people are either incapable or unwilling to read. I have had people walk up to me to ask me how much something is, only for the price tag to be featured prominently on the item. "It's $9.99, ma'am." "How did you know?" "It says so on the price tag, ma'am." Story 25. I used to manage a retail store that sold teen clothing, so as expected, I primarily had teens working for me. One employee came to the back room while I was on break and asked what I was eating. Somehow the topic turned to how I should have brought chicken for lunch, because she wanted chicken. I told her I was vegetarian and therefore don't eat meat. She tells me chicken is not meat, it's poultry, and vegetarians can eat poultry? She said at the grocery store, the aisles list meat and poultry separately, so they're obviously different. We argued for a couple of minutes before I finally told her to go back to the sales floor. She didn't last at the job long, but damn. Story 26. When my daughter was born, we had to see the hospital pediatrician before we could switch to our usual one. We're in a tiny exam room and he's going over the do's and don'ts for new parents. To precede this, he's an older Southern man, and I assume she will be sleeping in a crib in the nursery. We have a bassinet set up beside the bed to make night feeding easier. She can't sleep with you. She won't be in the bed, she has a bassinet beside the bed. If she sleeps in the same room, there will be too much carbon dioxide and she'll suffocate. That's what causes SIDS. Then isn't this exam room unsafe? We put in a complaint with the practice and the hospital. That's some ridiculously incorrect information to be spouting off at people, especially parents who take everything a doctor says as gospel. I can't even find the logic in that. Story 27. I had a foreign exchange student from Holland stay at my house. I live in British Columbia. I asked him what he wanted to see while in Canada, and he asked if we could go check out Niagara Falls one afternoon. Crazy how some people just don't have a concept of how huge Canada is. I think especially people from a country that you could drive across in 5 hours. Story 28. I had a bald man return a hairdryer because it burnt his head. Story 29. I had a bald man return a hairdryer because it burnt his head. Story 30. One of my closest friends, really good guy, but well, I'm learning Spanish, and I once told him I was reading this Don Quixote book. I complained about how difficult it was because it was written in 1605. And he said, wait, Spanish existed back then? Story 31. I used to work for a chatbot app. Our app would text our users every morning with a greeting in a different language, i.e. hola, bonjour, etc. One day we got blown up by a user saying their account was hacked. She said, "My name is Kim Smith, not Kim Konichiwa. Someone's hacked my account." When we explained that our service has been clearly saying hello to her in other languages every day, and that Konichiwa is hello in Japanese, and her account was fine, she went on a racist rant and said Disney was behind the destruction of America. Yep. Story 32. I knew a girl in high school who wanted to breathe fire. She put lighter fluid in her mouth, and instead of blowing it onto a flame, she lit it on fire inside her mouth, and then tried to blow it out. She came to school the next day with a bandage over half her face. Story 33. My dad is a pesticide investigator for the state and heard this on a complaint. I set out all these bird feeders and bird baths, but not one bird comes to my yard. I bet it is all those pesticides that Crop Duster is laying down in the field. This complaint came from a local school board member as she were standing in her 5-acre yard with 20 or more cats running around her. Story 34. I once used the flashlight on my phone to look for my phone under the couch. Definitely felt like a dumbass for the rest of the day. Story 35. I'm a physician, an eye doctor specifically. I will tell you that the longer I work, now 15 years, my standard for the average person continues to decline. Case in point, thanks to the awful information filtering out there, I had a patient just last week who read that vitamin D helps you resist a coronavirus infection. Well, he had also read that you can get more vitamin D by getting more sun. So he wanted to collect as much light as possible with his eyes. As a result, he stared at the sun for a solid 60 seconds and burned holes directly into his retinas, permanently reducing his vision with no chance at future improvement. Story 36. I just finished tutoring 2 Intro to Comp Sci courses. Lesson 1 was about defining variables. Naturally, there's people that didn't know how to do that by the final. People learn at different rates. I get that. But how did you not learn Lesson 1 after 15 weeks, 20-ish homework assignments, 7 quizzes, and 2 previous exams? Story 37. I was on a call with my mom, getting ready to leave the house. I spent 20 minutes on the phone with her, freaking out that I can't find my phone and I need to leave for work. My mom asked me if I'd checked my purse. That's when it clicked. Story 38. People are so susceptible to marketing these days that they think just because something is called diet, it must be good for them. Reminds me of my flatmate from uni who used to drink smart water before taking exams. Story 39. I give up on humanity every time I get a misdialed call from a random person who gets mad at me because I'm not the one they were looking for. This happens to me several times a year. Story 40. I had a friend once who truly believed that magicians like Chris Angel and David Blaine had some kind of magical power or telekinesis, something along those lines. While watching one of those magicians on TV performing on the street, he argued, "How could this be fake? Look at all those people. Can't fake all that. Has to be some kind of power or magic." I would then have to ask, do you realize that movies are fake? They fake entire universes, planets, cities, war, etc. He didn't get what I was getting at. Story 41. I used to work in aircraft maintenance. There was a cage used for putting tires inside when pumping them up to protect people if a tire burst due to the high pressures involved. Well, a story we always got told was of a trainee that was told to go pump a tire up and was instructed, make sure you use the cage. Lo and behold, someone checked on him 5 minutes later, and there he was, squeezed inside the cage with the tire half inflated. Story 42. I worked at a larger grocery chain whose deli used scales that would show you digitally the weight, so 1.5 pounds would show 1.50 pounds on the scale, etc. The person I worked with, a 35-year-old woman, had to ask me to come over and tell her how much she had sliced every time she assisted someone. This went on for over 4 months. She had passed the written and verbal tests they give to verify that you are able to do this. She didn't seem to have problems reading any other signs or numbers, so I don't think dyslexia played a part. But man, it was so frustrating trying to do my job as well as hers. Story 43. I work in IT, and I once had a lady call me from home because she couldn't get connected to her VPN. I asked her if she was connected to her home wireless network. She replied saying that she did not have home wireless. I then asked how she was connecting to the internet. Her reply was, "I'm using the cell tower. I can see it from my house." While this is technically possible with a hotspot or cellular card in your PC, this isn't what she meant. She thought she could get internet service via Wi-Fi from the cell tower. Story 44. I recently spent 20 minutes on the phone with a board member, trying to diagnose why his camera wasn't working for our online meetings. Funny thing, you have to actually have a camera in order for it to work. Story 45. I just had a customer yell at me for putting their eggs in a separate bag, saying they don't want all those bags and the paper ones always rip. They then proceed to grab the eggs, put them in the bag, and then proceed to throw a pound of flour on top. It was somewhat satisfying seeing their face as we heard the cracks, until I realized I'm the one who needed to clean it up. Oh, also she complained that we hadn't warned her about the fragility of eggs. Story 46. I work at a restaurant. We were low on tomatoes for our tomato soup, so one person grabbed potatoes to see if we could use those instead. Story 47. I have met people in college unable to read at a child's level. I was tutoring some kids and was shocked as hell. I could not figure out how they had the marks to get into the school in the first place. Turns out they didn't get in based on their own merit. Really pissed me off and opened my eyes. The kids I helped were good kids, but they should be able to read better than my elementary school-aged child, which of course they definitely could not. Story 48. I once owned a smart car, and some stranger approached me at a gas station about why I didn't have a slow vehicle sign in the back of it, since all moped cars must have that. I tried explaining that it was a real car, just a bit smaller, but he didn't take it. According to him, I was driving illegally, and he was surprised the police hadn't stopped me yet on the highway. Story 49. One guy I met said that English is the true language of God because the Bible is written in English. Story 50. My old boss had a morning routine of walking around the office with a bucket. He was watering all of the plastic flowers every single day. Story 51. A girl in one of my college classes argued that heart transplants shouldn't be allowed because that's where the feelings are, and the person receiving the heart wouldn't be the same person anymore. Story 52. Our town was live streaming a holiday parade in case you were not able to make it out in person. This included a live chat feature as well. One mother who lives nearby wrote into the chat that her daughter didn't get outside in time and asked for them to turn around and come back to her street. Story 53. I still can't get over the time when my mom unironically claimed that the moon landing was fake because the moon was like 40 times the size of Earth. How that proves it was fake, I don't know. Story 54. The amount of people who think Jesus lived in the United States is astonishing. Story 55. I have a fraternal male twin. I am female. And in high school, I had a girl ask if we were identical. I said, no, he's a dude. And she said, no, I mean, genetically, are you identical? And I just stared at her, wondering if she skipped all of our science classes to not know the answer. Story 56. My family has 2 electric cars, and the sheer number of people who ask, yes, but where do you put the gas after explaining that it runs on batteries is staggering. I think it's because they're still thinking hybrid car rather than all-electric car. But even after a very thorough explanation, they often still go back to, but where does the gas go? Story 57. I was driving on the interstate yesterday evening. Traffic wasn't that heavy. There was a semi that was on the shoulder ready to get back on the road so the car in front of me comes to a complete stop to let this truck on the road. Naturally, I had to come to a sudden stop, and so did the semi behind me. Thankfully, there was no one in the left lane, so the semi was able to get around me. But if there was someone in the left lane, an accident would have happened, and I likely would have taken the brunt of it. Please, people, don't stop on the interstate. Story 58. A girl in one of my college classes didn't understand how dogs in Spain understood their owners. She thought dogs only understood English and were just lost as hell in any other country. Another friend, now 27 and in the working world, recently called to ask me what interest is because they keep charging this interest thing on my loans. Story 59. Finding out people who can't swim will take their children who also can't swim to water parks and get into the wave pool, expecting tubes and floaties to keep them alive. Wave pools are dangerous enough even for people who can swim. Why would anyone who can't swim willingly get into one? Go to a water park, sure, but stick with the shallower rides that aren't full of waves designed to knock people around. Story 60. Someone who had been trying a Mediterranean diet on the advice of their doctor managed to put on 30 pounds in the 4 weeks since they were advised to do so. The classic fish and vegetables approach they had fervently adhered to had comprised of eating nothing but deep-fried fish and fries every day for 4 weeks. Story 61. I was watching March of the Penguins in high school biology next to the dumbest girl I've ever met. First, the DVD had a trailer for Happy Feet before the movie, so she immediately goes, "Oh my God, how did they get the penguins to dance like that?" thinking it was part of the documentary. Then later on there is a scene where one of the penguins gets eaten by a sea lion. She gasps and asks her friend how they'd gotten a dinosaur on film. Story 62. Worked at a Starbucks in a mall a few years ago. Some of the stores were going to be closed for Easter, and they had a list of those stores on signs all around the store way ahead of time. Lady walks up to me at the register and asks if I know what stores will be closed. I tell her I don't know them all, but that there's a sign right behind her with a list, to which she promptly responds with, "I don't read signs," then expects me to tell her what she wants to know. I couldn't hold my laughter after that. Story 63. Facebook and YouTube comment sections. I'm no Shakespeare myself, but the inability of so many people to construct a complete, coherent, grammatically correct sentence is stunning.